Okay, welcome ladies and gentlemen to today's webcast on the Snom Multi-Cell DECT system. I'm going to be handing over to Mark Wegleb and Oliver Wittig from Snom to hand over the presentation to them. So sit back, relax and enjoy. Thank you guys.
Thank you very much. Good morning everybody.
Morning guys.
My name is Mark. With me is Oliver. We both work in the Indop team at Snom. And today we will talk about best practices and do's and don'ts when you plan to install and deploy our multi-cell DECT system on 3CX phone system.
Yeah, let's see what we have to say. In fact, multi-cell, Snom Multi-Cell and 3CX is actually quite a nice match. Took a while to understand all the provisioning details from 3CX to the multi-cell, and but it looks like it's very popular. There's a lot of customers jumping on it simply because the scalability is very nice, and price-wise it's absolutely okay. Yeah. There's a lot of automation inside, which makes the system very nice and usable. So let's just see what we have in best practices, because we wanted to have this, let's say, as near to the actual implementers and customers as possible.
Okay, we will start with a short introduction to DECT multi-cell. This is a strictly technical webinar. This is not a no sales slides here, just to understand what a multi-cell is about. So we have multiple base stations in one network. Each base station has a coverage of 100 to 300 meters, and these base stations are synced along each other to share information about zip registrations, handsets connected, etc. So this is a nice overview showing you what a multi-cell is about. So the coverage, as I said, 100 meters inside maximum and 300 meters outdoor. And this multi-cell setup allows roaming among multiple base stations. This means users or handsets can walk while they are on a call, and then they can get hand-overed from one base station if they leave the coverage of this base station, and will be connected to the next one. Talking about zip registrations, we have a maximum of 30 zip registrations per base station. And all the zip registrations in a multi-cell network, they will be distributed automatically among all base stations connected. As for the voice channels per base, we have a maximum of 8 concurrent calls per base station in narrowband and 4 concurrent calls in wideband.
So I just add a few things on the coverage. Like a very common question is how the sync is actually working. Yeah? If this is a sync via LAN, because all the bases, of course, are LAN connected, or if it's over the air. So in this case, you can see this in the circles. The real synchronization, so how they should sit together, is over the air. So that's an important thing, because some systems, they have also over the LAN synchronization. SIP registration is a half statistical number, let's say, because deployment can have loads of registrations, which are distributed, really distributed among base stations automatically. So you don't have to think about, oh, I have a base station, there's only 30 registrations. I have a problem because we have in this area, we have maybe more people or something like that. Yeah. So this also is an automatic thing. It's just a baseline number we need to know. And of course, voice channels. I mean, voice channels concurrent calls is important. Yeah, depending on where a lot of people sit, or simply to save money at the right spots.
Yeah, this brings us to a first example calculation. So if you have a number given of zip registrations, it has handsets you need to connect, let's say 91, divided by 30 per base station, you would come up with 4 base stations you need minimum for this installation. Nevertheless, this is obviously not best practice. as you have to think about voice channels available on each base station. So our recommendation as best practice is to calculate with 8 users, 8 registrations or 8 handsets per base. So this gives you a number of 11 or 12 bases, which would be the best practice for this size of installation.
And why 8 per base? Simply because let's say, this is one real call. So you have 100% call coverage. So if you, for example, if you know in your normal company, it's not like the typical sales heavy caller thing. It's just a normal company. You have maybe 20% of all the registrations are needed to have concurrent calls. Then you size it accordingly. So let's say you always keep things in mind. How many concurrent calls do I want to have? In FreeCX is the same, yeah. So how you have to check your channels basically, and here's the same. So you first identify the areas where the concurrent calls will happen. And with this number, you have already a good estimation of your bases. And the next thing you do is you distribute the bases around the area, let's say, and to find out where they sit best to have the best connection, and then ultimately the best roaming experience and best audio.
Yeah. So calculation of concurrent calls is part of the assessment we will talk about in the upcoming slides. So how to plan a DECT installation, a multi-cell DECT installation at the location, which is definitely a must. So it's nothing you can do on a spreadsheet, on an Excel spreadsheet, or any DECT calculator. It's really going onto the site and doing an assessment. So what do we need for this? As you can see in this picture, so you need a base station with local power, battery powered, and you need at least one handset in what we call the assessment mode. And well, with this you can start the assessment. As Oliver has been present in many bigger installations at hospitals and universities, I will let him say another few words about the assessment.
So let's say the way it works is like what you see on the picture, really. Yeah. So you have one base station, and you have ideally some sort of what is it in English? I actually don't know. The photograph thing to put it. Tripod, exactly. To put it high up or near the ceiling, or where the final base actually should go to. Because in a deployment, the main issue you normally have is where are the LAN cables, where will the builders put the LAN cable, and to make sure that they do not come twice, you have to do it very, very carefully. So the way it works is you have like this combination of like one tripod, one base plus one handset. There's no LAN, nothing. The only thing the base needs is power, and of course your handset has power. And then you connect the handset to the base. So when you connect the handset to the base, again, no PBX needed. Here, so far, FreeCX is not really needed because it's only assessment. And naturally, you normally don't have LAN at that point. And then you can see already in the picture, you can see the rating, so how strong the signal is right now to the base. And what you do then is you leave your tripod and you just walk around to see what area this one base can actually span. So, but let's say in big deployments, you have not one tripod, but you have 3, because you always try to do let's say a triangular assessment scheme, so that a handset, when it's walking, can see ideally 2 more bases. This is later for failover. Just imagine one base goes down, the system should still work. And of course, for ideal roaming. So the handset at any time can decide on which base it will get the audio next. So so you put one tripod, you walk, you check the signal. There's a lot of discussion about what the signal should be. And we also share the same thing, like minus 70 dBm is fine. Yeah. Because then even doors can close later. So you check the signal, and if you see that it reaches your, let's say, your dBm target, then you know here or nearby should be the next base. And then of course you check all the sorts of doors, special. We just recently had a company very strange in Hamburg. They have metal doors, and they don't really need them. This is for design, and metal is really hard for DECT. So here you have to be very, very carefully and have to do assessments very nicely.
Okay, so assessment goals, redundancy per base. So one handset should have at least 2 other bases it could connect to. Don't go below -70.
Below means in this case, because people get confused with the minus. So -70, for example, -70 is always perfect. If a door closes or even if a lorry is in between, let's say, it will still have good audio signal. -80 is very critical to synchronization of all the bases. And from -90, you lose audio. So audio, you can see there's a lot of tolerance for audio. So it's 20 dB is a lot, but for synchronization, it's only 10 dB. So -70 is ideal. -80 gets critical with synchronization, and -90 is simply no audio anymore. So just keep in mind, -70 everywhere, perfect.
Yeah. So the minus is important. So -30 is better than -80.
Yeah.
Yeah. Floor to floor, building to building connections.
Yeah.
Just keep in mind where you have floors, you have to consider people walking from one floor to the next one, taking the stairs, elevators, going out of a building and getting into the next building, all these kind of things.
And you know, the typical administration of buildings, also hospitals, they all look the same. It is like one long corridor, let's say, and in this corridor you either place 1 or 2 bases because it's normally enough. So, but in the floor below or above, if you place the base stations at the same point, that's not ideal. So you move them a bit. That even from floor to floor, it shapes like it builds a sort of triangle, so that you even have failover to the second or to the 4th floor if you're on 3rd. Yeah? So floor to floor roaming is very common. And it's very easy to do. So one guy goes down with his tripod, and the other 2 stand upstairs and just check what the reader is reading is saying. And that's it. Yeah? So I can summarize that one. So like we said, you don't need much. You only need a base with power. And if you have a base with power, you take whatever handset, no matter which one of Snom's smallest to biggest one, doesn't matter. There's a special menu which you get with this Star 47. Then you select your base station, because the base station, the handset searches for base station and lists one by one. So for example, if you're near 2 or 3 tripods, you will see yours and the base station of the others. So you select yours, you go and walk, and then maybe you select the other one just to recheck the meter reading to your friend's tripod, etc. And like this, you sync with your people helping you if you're not alone, and then you can more or less exactly say where base should be. Sometimes 5 meters plus and minus is really a difference. Yeah? And then of course you always look for good receptions, but that's clear. Yeah? Hallway coverage. This is a very misleading thing. This is the long corridor. A long corridor can easily be 50 meters or more, and you have no bad reading whatsoever. Check very carefully if there's fire doors in between, because people tend to forget that. But in general, of course, the corridor is very easy. Yeah? Floor to floor, we mentioned already. So 2 corridors, let's say one over another. If you do it slightly, if you put the bases slightly skewed, then you have then you will get floor to floor coverage automatically. And yeah, fire safety doors in general. Fire safety door, if it's closed, depending on build, kills the signal to like 90%. So if you see a fire safety door, it might be needed, same for elevator, that you need to place a base directly in front and another one directly behind, because then they will still have easy signal, enough signal to allow roaming and of course to allow synchronization. So always keep in mind, everything which looks heavy and which looks metal, check carefully, check twice.
So these are the do's. What are the mistakes we've seen in some of the projects or from experience? So what shouldn't you do?
You can even say this is by priority, yeah. Because what we really see most is guesswork-based placement. Take the corridor again, yeah. The corridor is 50, maybe 80 meters long. We have quite a couple of buildings with a layout like this, and then they put one base, and then of course they walk only with audio. And I can ensure you, audio will work, and you will not hear one drop, but maybe the radio coverage is near -80 or even on top. That means the synchronization. So, for example, if you add new extensions, you add a new base, you add whatever, you change something, even display names, it can be that it goes async because you didn't do that. So in this case, guesswork-based placement, even though people do that, of course they do, is the worst thing we have. What can happen? You can actually lose your chain. Lose your chain means the chain all of a sudden says, I'm no longer a chain, I'm somehow split, I search for bases, etc. And this is a nightmare. And of course, this nightmare we don't need to have with our end customers at the first place. So always assess. Make sure you try not to save money on bases that you do -80, for example, everywhere in comparison to -70. Again, the customer will not like it if something happens. Direct path base station over the air. This could be a float, building to building, for example. If there's only one base station connecting to another one, for example, connecting two buildings, then it's very clear if one of the base station gets crashed or maybe loses power, something simple, huh? Then you will lose the second building in a hole because there's no backup. So never ever one path, which is only one single path without failure. Put two, yeah, or put three. It's always better than having trouble later. Human bodies is quite interesting. We experience this quite often when all of a sudden in a hospital there's like visite and all the doctors run around, etc. Or they actually have a very nice coverage. So they reduce the signal by 6 dB easily. Yeah? So what we do in this case, we just take the handset and put the hands around it very tightly, and you have a similar situation without all the reflections, etc. So just think about it. An empty corridor is not the normal corridor. Normally, a corridor is somehow busy with people. And the one thing where you need to put more bases is if you have concurrent call areas. Yeah. For example, one university in Scotland showed us a room and told very small room actually, and told us, by the way, here 16 people will do all the call center things. Well, it's English way or Scottish way of putting people in a small space. 16 as a number was quite heavy, let's say, but the area doesn't matter. The concurrent calls matter. So in this case, they need, of course, minimum 2 bases for 8 concurrent calls per base in narrowband calls. So, but then they have no failover. So they need 3 bases. So each handset inside this heavy call area should see minimum 2 other bases. If it's 3 in total, you have just calculated 24 channels, perfectly fine. Everyone can call and failover. So, okay, we told them. The integrator wasn't happy because he understood that he needs to put 1 more base. Yeah, so imagine the cost. And but the end customer actually said, of course, I want to have them calling all the time. I need failover. Put the extra base, and then discussion was over. So think about that. It's never good to save money on concurrent call areas and on assessment. Forget that. Yeah, multi-primary. It's we'll come to that later, I guess. This is the over the air and over the LAN synchronization. It's something you should avoid if you can. Okay. So a living cell. What is a living cell? A living cell is when all the bases see each other very, very nicely, -70 dB, let's say. You can see this in the picture more or less nicely because each circle touches another base, 1 or 2. So this is a living cell, even though you can clearly see that this is also a chain. So here the failover is so la. Yeah? So there should be another level of bases on top or down. that it even has failover. But the important bit here in this picture is, again, make sure that the coverage of one base, so the radius of the coverage, sees minimum 1 or 2 bases. So to the left and to the right, we always have failover.
Okay.
So, and this is, again, so over-the-air synchronization is the most important thing for multi-cell, because the multi-cell permanently reconfigures itself. There's a view in the web interface where you can see that quite nicely, but it's very confusing as well, because you see paths you would not expect and you would never have imagined to happen. So base 1 is on base 2, and then maybe base 3 is on 2 in a sort of daisy chain fashion, and then there's another one, even though they are very nearby. Forget that, because the system automatically reconfigures the cell anyway, all 15 minutes or so. Yeah? And you can be ensured that no matter how the actual status at a time looks, how weird it looks, it will always have the roaming capabilities you want. So it's just confusing. But all this will break miserably if you do this red box thing. Once you have a base which is no longer in air sync, then you get in trouble. So again, assessment will do. So
okay.
This thing I really like, because we worked with 3CX for quite a while, so over a year definitely, to improve that further and further, and it's actually very nicely done, and we can see it from the customer base that setup is now really straightforward with 3CX, and Mark put very nice foils together.
So let's say, okay, you've done all your assessments. The installer came around, they installed the base stations to the walls or to the ceilings. Everything is connected to your LAN. So now it's time to register the base stations to your 3CX system. And as Oliver already mentioned, this is actually quite easy to do. Also, you will find on 3CX website a very nice how-to or technical instructions how to set up multi-cell with 3CX. Okay, so everybody knows this screenshot. So you go into your 3CX system web interface, and you will see in the list of phones, you will see the automatically detected base stations as in the screenshot. You pick one of those and you add an extension, or you assign an existing extension to this base station. So this is the very first step.
And of course, the base station upon power shows up automatically, like every other Snom phone. It's also very nice, so you don't search for it, but it comes up. Yeah? So how exactly? So how does the base station find the 3CX server, or vice versa? Well, there are many different ways to do that. In a local installation, this would be done by zip, plug and play method. But you can also have a hosted 3CX instance, and then you would need to point the base station to this hosted 3CX. And this can be done either using the local DHCP option 66, providing the setting server URL of the 3CX in this option. And then when the base station receives its IP address information, will get the setting server URL and point directly to this setting server. Or you can use our redirection server, where you can upload the MAC address to our hosted redirection server, and then just provide the setting server URL of your hosted 3CX, and then the base will be redirected via the cloud to the hosted 3CX instance. Or if nothing of these methods is available, then you can also manually, of course, paste the server URL on the web server of the base station. Even though manually we didn't really see. So no. There's basically no one left who does that manually. It's also good for us, by the way. Yeah. So the more automation, the better it is. Yeah, manually always implies then there can occur errors, like typing errors or whatever. And then the nice typo always happens. Huh? So keep it automated. So first of all,
please make sure that all base stations run the latest recommended firmware version, which is the 324B12. And it's very important also that all base stations run the same version. But we will come to this later in the FAQ session. Okay, to update a base station which is, let's say, not registered to 3CX, you would do this via the web server of the base station. Yeah, you can use either a local web server where you have the firmware files uploaded, and you can point the base station to your local web server, or you can use our Snom DECT server as written in this screenshot, dect.snom.com. Yeah, just type in the required version 324, hit start, and it will start updating the base station.
Yeah, when you have a base, this screenshot you will see says all. Yeah, if the thing is connected to the internet, just do what you see here and done. Yeah, then the one base station or the cell, no matter what, depending on what you have, will upgrade.
Yeah. If you have any questions, here's the link to our wiki page where also this firmware update process is described. Okay, so now we have all our base stations on the same firmware version, recommended firmware version. We are assigning an existing extension to this base station. As you can see, we have the MAC address auto-detected. It's a Snom M700. Nothing strange here. You all should know this from 3CX. Very simple to assign extensions to a device. And then we need to register our first handset on this extension number. So all you have to do is you take your M25, M65, or M85 Snom handset, you go into the menu, you go to connectivity, and then you hit register. You choose the first empty spot. You type in the standard access code 4 zeros, and you will have your registration on the handset.
Yes, and of course, since it's a DECT device, DECT registration on all brands works more or less the same. Here, as you can see, it's the exact same thing. It's just normal DECT registration way of doing it. And then the base station will do all the zip thing with 3CX automatically.
Yeah, so very easy. Okay, so then we can see now the M700 with this step is now provisioned by 3CX. If you log on to the web server of the base station, you will see actually that we now have the configuration server address as seen below here. This is the IP address of my local 3CX, and we have in the top box here we have the first zip identity we just registered, the 206 on the 3CX PBX.
And of course, on your 3CX status, it also shows up as registered and OK. It's just that you can recheck what is on what happened on the base.
Yep. Okay, so all looks good to this point. So now we want to add more extensions. So let's say we have an installation with 50 handsets or 50 extensions. So we add extensions to our base station. And very important, this needs to be done on the base station, not on the 3CX web server, but on the base station. So all you have to do is click, well, go on the web server of the M700 base station, go to the menu item extensions, add extension, and then you will see this menu down here, add extension. Just type in line name if you want to change it. If not, you just leave it as with a standard value, line 1. The extension number 207. Of course, this extension must exist on the 3CX, so you need to create all these extensions beforehand on the 3CX system. Give it the authentication name and username. The password, you can copy all this from the 3CX portal and then hit save.
Yeah, just as you can see, the server is already pre-selected with 3CX. The M700 in theory can support more than one SIP server, but on the FreeCX installation, of course, you have your one and only FreeCX, and it's always automatically selected. That's why at the end of the day, you make a new account on FreeCX, you get the username and you get the password, that's it. And this is what you have to enter here.
Yeah. So you have to enter very little information here. So you don't have to enter mailbox name, you don't have to enter mailbox number, simply because once the M700 base station, the first one, is under control of the 3CX, like auto provision as we have seen, the 3CX provisioning template already delivers all the placeholders for the next or the additional extensions you want to register on the DECT multi-cell network. So we have 200 placeholders. So you just have to provide the extension name and extension password, and that's all you need to do. Okay. So now we have our second extension in the list, and now we have to assign a handset to this new extension. And again, it's the same procedure as before. You take the second handset, you go again to the menu item connectivity, type in the access code 4x0, and you have the next extension on
and then
the handset.
Just as you can see, the EPA is on the left side. The EPA is the unique number of the handset. So once the handset is registered to a specific extension, it stays there. So if power off, if the base comes up, if the base needs to be rebooted, if the chain gets out of power, whatever, everything imaginable normally can happen. The handset will always search for its single slot and then reconnect automatically. The same will happen if you leave the cell. Let's say you took that to the lunch break or whatever, your handset, which is quite common. People do that, yeah? And then you come back, it searches for it, it registers, done. So you do it once.
Exactly. Okay, so now we have here our list of extensions. So by now we have 3 extensions registered, successfully registered, as we can see in the state column on the far right. So the SIP registration is successful to our server, which has the alias 36PBX. Server IP address is shown here. And on the left-hand side, we have the EPIs of the handsets. And then we have to check, okay, what are the firmware versions of our handsets? As with the base stations, it's mandatory or at least recommended to have the latest recommended firmware version and the same firmware version on all handsets. So this must be totally in sync.
Yeah. SIP registrations, for example, if the base itself has a round LED ring thing, which blinks and is green, oranges, whatever. Yeah, it has all sorts of status information. For example, if you have one SIP registration not working, then the base station actually doesn't like that. It blinks red. So whenever you walk by the wall and you see a blinking red base station, you can ensure that something happened with the SIP registration. It's quite a picky thing, but yeah, again, yeah, we want to have the status all green. All green means all is registered, all is working. Just not that you wonder that it blinks. It normally is one SIP registration. You can easily see from the state, and in the logs, everything is there. You can check easily. You can find out what happens if it's a FreeCX thing you just forgot or whatever. Yeah? It's very easy to track down the problem.
Okay, just a few words how to update firmware version on a handset. It's actually quite easy. You do this via the web interface of the base station. You initiate the firmware update for handsets, and then you have to place the handsets in the charging cradle. And once they're in the charging cradle, the firmware update process will start. Okay, so let's have a look at the phone status on our 3CX. So as we can see, we have one base station, 2 base stations, which are not with any extension by now, the bold ones. And then at the bottom, we have 3 base stations with the firmware version 3.2 24 and B12 MAC address, and then we have one which is provisioned, and the other two are unprovisioned, which is actually good that they are unprovisioned, because we only need to provision the first base station, the master base station, via the 3CX, which is very important, because this is the cause of some support tickets we receive. We will talk later about also that the user provisions more than one base station via the 3CX phone system, and then complication starts.
Just maybe as a easy thing to remember, see the first base station like a normal desk phone. Yeah, you have one thing registered with the first extension. It's like one device, one extension. This is the one you provision via 3CX. Just keep that in mind, that the very first thing acts like an IP phone, and all the rest automatically joins without 3CX needing to do anything.
Okay, so now, as you can see, we have multiple base stations connected to both our network and 3CX. Here it's a screenshot on the master base station, which is the one which is provisioned by the 3CX. So this is the welcome page. When you log onto the web server, you can see the SIP identities, status all okay. So now we can go on and enable multi-cell mode. Okay, so this is done on this very same base station. You go to the menu item multi-cell, and then you just enable multi-cell system. You will see this, the base will provide automatically a system chain ID. In this case, it's 512. It doesn't really matter what number it is. It's just an identifier for the DECT chain. And you click Save. So we can see here are some settings you can also provide, and you should keep in mind. So we can have the automatic DECT sync configuration enabled. This is recommended. The second one, allow multi-primary, should be disabled, very important. We don't want to have multiple primary bases in one network, because this causes confusion in synchronization, and in the end, the loss of our DECT chain. In the bottom part, base station settings, the number of SIP accounts by default is set to 8. You might need or want to raise this number to maximum 30. As we saw in the beginning, this is the maximum number of SIP registrations one single base station can handle.
Just as a reminder, 8 is also the number of normal concurrent calls. So each base station can have a non-HD concurrent calls 8. That's why this 8 means one registration also means 100% call coverage. But it's a value you normally don't have, because you don't need that many calls.
Exactly. So by default, all these settings should be as shown on this slide. But just check on your base station if is everything like this. And then you can have a look at the DECT tree. So here we have the example of 2 base stations so far in our multi-cell installation. We have the base station we are on the web server right now, which is this unit, the .30 IP address. So this is selected as the primary, as we provisioned this from the 3CX. This is always automatically the primary base station. And you can see the second base with useful information, firmware version. You can check again if all the firmware versions are the same MAC address, and the IP address of the second base, the slave base. It shows IP status connected, and it's synced to our primary base station. And DECT properties locked, so DECT chain is working, and you have a small visualization down here of the DECT chain. This obviously gets more interesting the more base stations you have connected. your DECT chain.
Yeah, and this snapshot is it's connected already, but it's still searching for the real signal rating. That's why it still says minus infinite.
Infinite, yeah.
Yeah, minus infinite dBm.
So in the next slide, you will see it found its real dBm value, so minus 28, for obvious reason, because I had the two base stations sitting next to each other on my desk.
So it's a dream value you don't need to have.
Exactly. Minus 70 is fine. Minus 60 is better. Minus 28 is a dream. So now I'm just on the other unit, on the slave base station, let's say, and you can see, okay, it's connected to the primary, and everything is as it should be.
Yeah. Short side note: no matter on what base you are, when there is a living cell, so like we see here with two bases, the web interface always looks the same. So it gives you the same data, same extension number, same DECT tree, etc. So it doesn't really matter on what base you are. This is also important because bases can, of course, fail, yeah, somewhere. And if someone put a hammer and simply knock them down, we even had vandalism like this. So you go to another base and you can still see the chain. It's fully synced. That's just a chain visualization. One of our, let's say, supporter guys, Sasha Ludwig, did, because that was in the early days where we did not quite understand which handset is on what base and why, and what dBm, and why is the tree reconfiguring. Is there an algorithm we can understand, yeah, with human brain, let's say, and he did that. You can find it on GitHub if you want to do a visualization. The good news is you don't really need that, because the automatic mode is really automatic, and like I said before, if the chain looks somehow weird, yeah, does not mean it's not working. The audio will always be ensured.
Are there any cases or reasons when you should not, or when you should disable the automatic DECT tree synchronization and go to manual?
Yeah, well, we have people in manufacturing and administration buildings where they wanted to make sure that the path from the warehouse to the administration is really fixed. And in this case, they didn't want to have potential weak connections, which can happen because there were a lot of bases nearby. So they wanted to specifically have 3 pairs to connect one building with another. In this case, yes. In this case, you would fix it. But in general, you don't need that. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. So what have we seen in the past 12 months? Support tickets, phone calls coming in. What are the questions normally asked, or what are the problems or issues that occur? So yeah, no working DECT chain.
Or like it says here, the next base I put just does not want to join. How comes? Why is that? Yeah, it's actually very simple. The firmware version is not identical. Well, if the base comes out of production, it does not have 324 B12. It has something different, yeah, something below. So in this case, the base station will simply refuse because the other one is newer. So make an upgrade of this base station and you're done. The next thing, which is more common, is actually that time is not set correctly. So since the synchronization needs to be very, very, let's say, exact, timestamps get compared. And they should not be away from each other, not even 5 minutes. So what you need to make sure is that in your network, the time NTP server is always available, and all bases see that. So that is actually the main thing we hear. We cannot join, and it's simply because of the time. The interesting thing is, if you go on the base in the main page, it actually tells you that the time is out of sync. And of course, it says 9070, for example, if there's no time at all. Yeah. But as usual, yeah, no matter how red and blinking you do that, the people still don't see. So if the new base is not joining, check the time and check the firmware version. That's just about it. Okay, so that's more complicated. all of a sudden you see free running in your DECT tree. It says free running or searching or whatever. Searching is fine for a while because it can be that the base is searching a better connection, for example. But if it's a permanent searching, then it's very clear something with the assessment went wrong. Or, for example, you build a sort of daisy chain way of connecting bases with each other, and one base in the middle just failed. Yeah? Then you will have at the other end you will have free running bases. Free running means they do not know where to connect to. In this drawing, you can easily see that the furthest right base just does not have the coverage to see the neighbor. Yeah, it just does not go up to the base. Again, assessment makes sure this is not happening. You can have cases like I mentioned with metal doors and things like this, that temporarily when a door gets closed, you have something like that because of all of a sudden they don't find each other anymore. If you know that it's a temporary thing, you can ignore that basically, or you can at least tell the customer, if you close this door, you will have this and this effect. You cannot call on the other side, only on this side, for example. If the customer says, yeah, that's fine, that's the way it is because we close it once a year, for example, then it's fine. If not, avoid it, simply avoid it. Make sure that you have the assessment which has full coverage all the time. Then there will be no free running bases. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's very seldom thing actually. But the essence is again, is coverage. Yeah. It looks like everything is fine, but for some reason the synchronization doesn't really work. In this case, first of all, if you're really confused what's happening, yeah, just call us. Yeah, if the deployment is big enough, you should definitely call us before, even that we can give you a bit more insight. But something like this can happen. Normally, in the logs, you will see why this base, which for example last week worked perfectly, all of a sudden doesn't work anymore. It can be something trivial that maybe you unfortunately provisioned more than one base with 3CX, because this you should never do. Like Mark said, the first one needs to be provisioned and all the rest is just connecting. Yeah. So sometimes people do that mistakenly, and then all of a sudden the two provisioned bases, they fight each other. And if they fight each other, someone wins. That means the chain will somehow break into parts. And this is what happens here. In this case, sometimes it's even needed. You just identify the base, you factory reset that one, put it back to the chain, and that's it. Yeah? But in this case, it's really something worth asking us. Yeah? It's very seldom.
So I just want to try to share quickly my screen because I have. Let's see here. I have something from one of the recent support tickets we worked on.
Yeah.
So for example, if you see something like this in your log, like dynamic extension zip data not updated, own data newer, then this is a clear indication that yeah, you probably provision more than only one base station via 3CX. And then the solution for this problem is yeah, just do it all again.
Yes, factory reset at least the one which always claims it's the newer one, and you know exactly this is not my first, this is not my master. Unfortunately, I put a second master, kill the second master, kill it from 3CX because it should not be provisioned. Factory reset, join the chain again, and that's it. Sometimes it can be that you have more than ones. We had one guy, simply because he didn't know, he actually put eight provisioned things. The thing is that a while it works absolutely flawless until they fight each other, who is the newest. So if you see that, if you have searching bases or whatever, some trouble, yeah, in red on the website, on the M700 web interface, you can see that. If you have trouble, search for this one, and if you see that, identify the one which says I'm newer, and then just factory reset the thing and join again. We put that extra in the webinar now. because this is a how to say, this is something you would not expect. That's why, again, just for the record, if you use FreeCX, and of course you do that, you provision your first M700, and that's it. And all the rest is unprovisioned. Very important thing. Okay. So back to the slides next to it, maybe. We just search for this.
Here it goes. Okay.
Very nice.
Just go to slide 34. We saw that one. Okay. So coming to the end, yeah, as all we have shown today in this webinar is a summary, or is experiences from support tickets we had coming in with calls from customers. But it's clearly to be stated that by now, both Snom and 3CX have done tremendous work to make our multi-cell DECT system working very well on 3CX phone system. Version 14 and our firmware version 324B12 works really good together. And most of the issues, yeah, can be resolved by reconfiguration or just sticking to these guidelines we have shown, and which are also shown on 3CX website. Nevertheless, we have one known issue which sometimes comes up, which is regarding the central address book. Currently, UTF-8 encoding is not supported, so please make sure you have everything encoded in ANSI instead.
ANSI, of course, also has umlaute and all the major Latin extra characters. UTF-8 is more elegant, but unfortunately the handsets are very limited, so you need ANSI. So if you, especially in Germany, if your name is Müller and the Ü looks very bad, then it simply means that it's not ANSI encoded. It's very easy to change that, of course, but you need to know. I have a second one, not because it's a big issue in general, but there's one guy who's really constantly pushing for it. 3CX has a nice way to control ringtones. Yes, we know that from our desk phones, this is very nice. You can use that, and it's really flawless. In the M series, especially on the handsets, this is really hard-coded. So if you want to have an external ringtone, the external ringtone is always the ringtone with index 1, for example. Yeah. So we try to put that in the roadmap month after month, and it always gets kicked out because it's basically maybe not even a handful of people saying that, but just that you know, the ringtone on the handset cannot be controlled via 3CX because this is really hard-coded in the handset. I still believe we will have that solved one day, but it's just not there yet. So please don't get confused, and yeah, it's like this.
Okay, final slide, just a short fact sheet about the firmware version we have mentioned several times, 324B12. Just to summarize, so we have maximum of 8 simultaneously calls. We can connect maximum of 50 slave bases to a master, 30 handsets registered to one base, even though this number doesn't really count or matter a lot, as handsets are distributed automatically throughout the whole DECT chain. 8 simultaneous handovers, 24 slaves. Yeah, well, this is just for your records fact sheet. With that, we are at our end of our presentation, so I think it's now time to get to your questions, if there are any.
I see already one interesting thing from Ferraz. Thanks for the question. So in his case, it's actually also quite common. Let's say it's the typical factory environment with the different buildings, but the difference are actually quite far apart. So the customer does not, of course, expect that you can roam between building 1 and 2 because there's no connection. It's maybe 200 meters or further away. Who knows? Huh? Maybe even we had this in the city of by Frankfurt somewhere, that they had different swimming pools. Public swimming pools, and they are of course not next to each other, but they still wanted to have a handset. They want to go into the swimming pool area, and then the handset should register and work. So here's a classical thing where over-the-air synchronization, of course, cannot work. That's very natural. In this case, you can do over the LAN synchronization, which is existing in the M700. But Ferraz, just to tell you, this is the multi-primary thing. Let's plan that together. Together means that give us a layout of how this would work, and then we explain what settings to set on the M700 with VCX that you can achieve that. So you basically have one cell, same, let's say, same number, same name. You register to this cell, but the cell is split into, for example, 3 parts, 3 buildings. Only working because the buildings are so far apart that they will never see each other. That is very important, but that is possible. Yeah? The other obvious thing, of course, is separate chains. Separate chains have the disadvantage that you need to re-register in each chain if you go from one building to another, but it's also possible. Yeah? Both versions will do. And yeah, so just if you're not sure about it, please ask how to do. Oh, okay. What happens if the master base station is offline? It's actually very nice because the cell doesn't need the master. But what happens if a base or many bases are offline, no power, whatever, and I want to change something? I want to put extra extensions. Then obviously the extra extensions get not synced to the offline bases. So whenever you make a change, add extensions, do something. Yeah, make sure that the chain is up. Well, normally it's easy. You go once on the let's say interface, and you see that the chain is up. So the most important thing is, no matter what base fails in a formerly living cell, the cell will be up, and registrations and calling will still be possible. For example, the registration which would sit on your master at that point, when the master is dead, will automatically be pushed to another base, basically distributed new. Yeah. So of course we don't want to have failing bases, but that's natural. Yeah, it can happen. Doesn't really matter. In Snom, we do that. For example, we have one base which is so badly placed by purpose that it really also fails. And sometimes we pull power, etc., just to see if it gets joined again, if it reconfigures, what happens to the handsets there. And if you do the assessment right, the failover, so that an handset will find a new base, it's very easy to do. And there's nothing you have to do because it's automatic. So that was actually two very good questions, because that's quite a common thing. People often tell us, what should we do if we need more than 200 bases and whatever. Yeah. The good news is, projects like this, you never do alone. You definitely make sure that 3CX and Snom is involved. So when you have a project with up to 1,000 handsets and more than 200 bases, and you know that it's actually happening, let us know long enough before. Give us the details from the setup, give us the details from the architects, etc. And then let's make talks and let's make the assessment together. Yeah, because this is important. So there's another question. Yeah. Small hotel, 42 rooms to avoid extensive. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So a hotel is actually easy because they have normally like very bad doors. Yeah. Walls are like paper. Hotel is ideal. 42 rooms. It depends how many floors, of course. We had one in Interconti in not Riyadh, in Jeddah, I guess. Yeah. They had 2 buildings next to each other, and then here the biggest problem was again that over the air, including failover, we needed to connect the 2 buildings. So if it's only one building, which I assume in 42 rooms, it's a very easy thing to do. Just do the assessment. You can do that alone even. Just do the assessment. Think about the corridor thing. Yeah, that from floor to floor, you also want to have a triangle failover type of thing, and that's it. So very easy to do. So let's say hotel, they scream for DECT, yeah, because they have all this very easy and soft walls. Sure. No, you actually mentioned already. Assessment again, maybe. We had another case where there was a very nice loading dock we could see. And the loading dock was of course empty when we came, because the building was brand new. No one moved in yet, etc. And the loading dock, of course, no matter how big it was, could easily be used, assessed, let's say, with one base. But imagine it's a loading dock, it's empty now. So what happens? So we asked one guy who luckily understood what a loading dock is really for, and then he said, by the way, we will have ship containers in here. Well, ship container is metal. Ship containers need to be placed in whatever corridorish setup, aligned somehow, yeah. And he had to plan how they will be aligned, etc. And then, of course, you can plan correctly, because then if you have containers, it's like real walls, yeah. Then you have aisles, and in the aisles you place the bases. And without this information, you would never be able to make the assessment correctly. So sometimes it's really important just to search for people and ask them, because all of a sudden they will give you the details you need. Well, when a container is there, or when many containers have been placed, or whatever, they change doors, or whatever the customer is doing, they will of course eventually come to you that something is not happening. But it's, of course, it's better if you simply ask stupid questions all over the place. Yo, I guess that's it.
If there are no further questions coming in, I would hand it over to 3CX to wrap up the webinar.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. Wonderful presentation, some great information there. I hope you all enjoyed it. Once again, thank you to Mark and Oliver for presenting this great webcast. I hope to see you all again very soon. Keep going back to our webinar page to see all our latest webinars. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you. Speak soon.
Thank you all. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye for now.